Okay, for Learning Exercise 8, we're going to continue with the Farkle game, the dice game we looked at last unit. If you remember, in this dice game, we roll 6 die. We look at the 6 dice, and we're going to run some very simplified rules. The rules for Farkle are a little more complicated, of course, than this. But for now, for every 1 you get, you're going to get 100 points, and for every 5 you get 50 points. So if you were to roll 2 1s and then some other dice, and then maybe 1 5, that would be the 2 1s would be at 200 points, 100 points each, and then the 5 would be 50 points, so 250 points for that roll. So we're going to try to calculate those points first and display them. So let's look at this. Now you'll want to download this project here, the Learning 8 sample project or start project. It has some changes from last week and some slight additions to it. And it's a good place to start. So download that and open up it in BlueJ here. So we have this die class, if you remember, that shows a single die. And in that class, we have a die, we have a value and sides, and we have a constructor. And we have set value and get value to get the value, and roll to roll that die, and in a toString method. And then the Farkle class uses the die class in a couple ways. So let's look at that. In the Farkle class, we have 6 die. They will die 1, die 2, die 3, die 4, and etc. And then in the constructor, we create all these die. So we have these die in Farkle. And one way to visualize this is to, let me bring up a diagram here, see if we can see it better. Imagine your Farkle object here. And again, we've declared the die in here, and we have these methods. But each die, well, let's just go through the code. Right away, when we when we have the die, when we create a Farkle, we instantiate, we go new die, we call this constructor for each die. If you remember that constructor, it sets the number of sides to 6 and then sets the value of the die to some random number. So you can kind of visualize that. So when we instantiate die 1, we create this die object, an instantiation, a copy of the die class, a die object. It has a value and a side, so sides is set to 6, and value is set to some random number between 1 and 6, let's say 4. And again, it has its own copy of all the methods. Then we instantiate die 2, we call the constructor for die 2. It sets its sides to 6 and its value to some random number, say 2. And then we keep going through that. We do that for die 3, and so we'll have 6 of these die objects. I only have 3 drawn out here, but we'd have 6 of these die objects, each tied to die 1, die 2, all the way to die 6. Each die object would have its own value, its own sides, and its own copy of the methods that it's going to run. So that's kind of our visualization for this. And the Farkle, we have a new roll 1 die method, which is largely blank, and you'll be entering code in there later on. We have a roll all dice that rolls all the dice. And then we have a display dice that displays the dice. It tries to calculate the score, but it doesn't do anything yet. You'll be doing that soon. And then prints out the score. And then a play game, we'll be doing this later on in this learning exercise. But let's look at this roll dice and display dice methods. So to try this out, we can just go into BlueJ. I'm going to recompile everything, it looks like. I'm going to create a new Farkle game. Just leave it as Farkle 1. And then I can do things like I can roll all the dice, and it'll display over here rolling the dice. I can then tell it to display the dice, and it'll print out the dice. 5, 3, 2, 4, 2, 1. Now, it should be figuring out the score. I should be getting 50 points for that 5 and 100 points for this 1, so I should be getting 150 points, but it's not. I could try rolling the dice again. It displays rolling the dice. And I can try displaying the dice. 666. So I have new dice here. And again, the score isn't right. Well, I don't have any ones here, but I have a 5 here. Now, in actual Farkle, 3 of a kind's worth points and stuff like that, but we're going to ignore that for now. So we're just doing the 1s and the 5s. So I have a 5 here. It should have been 50 points. So let's first have you modify this display dice routine. So when we call display dice, it says the 6 dice are, displays the dice, and then calculates the score and prints it out using some if-then statements. So we're going to open up Farkle, find the display dice method here. Here we print out all the die values, and then here's the score. We just declare a variable, integer variable score to set equal to 0, and then we want to print that out. So you want to insert your code here where it says insert code here. So what do you want to do? So think about this. When the die 1's value is 1, you want to add 100 to the score. So why don't you work on the code? Why don't you pause this video and try this code out? Okay, so here's my first attempt. I don't know how your first attempt went. But I put a if die 1 is equal to 1, so if the first die is a 1, then the score is going to be worth 100 points. Now there's some errors in here. How do we reference? We want the die's value. How do we reference that? We want to make sure we're doing the right comparison here. So why don't you pause again and see if you can correct. Maybe you got yours working, but mine, this still isn't working. So why don't you pause and try again. So I've got it where now I've got die 1's value is equal to 1. Now before that you probably saw, here let me go back here, so I saw some compile errors, incompatible types here. We're talking about an object, so we have to make sure we check its value. And then we have to also, inside ifs, make sure we're using the double equal. So again, die 1, so if we're looking at our image here, we're in Farkle, we've got this die named die 1, and we want to get its value. So we're going to say die 1 dot, but we can't access the value directly. We have to say, we have set value and get value, and we're going to call it get value, and that's going to return an integer. That's going to return the value variable as an integer. So we're going to say die 1 dot value is to get the value of the first die and check if that's equal to 1. And if so, we're going to set the score to 100. Now we're going to have to watch this in a sec, and there'll be an error there. So now I'm just going to duplicate this and do this. Now if there's a 5, we get 50 points. Watch my spacing a little bit. And now we can just do this. This is for the first die. Why don't you try to do this for the other dice and see if you can get that to work. So I'm just going to copy and paste these and check die 2, check die 3, check die 4, oops, and check each of these dies. So I end up with a whole bunch of if-then statements here, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But again, this still isn't quite working. Now at least I should be able to test this out. I'm checking all these die values, and I should be able to compile this. Oh, my mistake here. I was doing value. I should be doing get value for all of these. Sorry about that. Okay, so that's should have compiled before I did all those cut and pastes. Okay, now let's see if I can compile. Okay, now that's working. Now let's see if we can try this out. I'm going to go into my Farkle class. I'm going to compile everything, create a new game, roll all the dice. I'm going to clear my window here first. I'm going to roll all the dice, and I'm going to display the dice, and it should do the scores. 3, 3, 5, that's 50 points. 3, 5, that's another 50 points. But it's still only giving me 50 points. I can try this again. I can roll the dice and display the dice. And I've got, this is working. I've got 1, 5, 50 points. But I can roll the dice again. See if I get a luckier roll. Yeah, nothing there. So this again, roll the dice. I want, the error occurs when I get multiple numbers. Yeah, so now I have a 1, a 5, and a 1. And so I should have 100 plus 50 plus 50 plus 100, but it only gives me this last 100 here. So we just have to make sure, and maybe you saw this as we're going through this, we have the score 0, and then when we check this, we just set the score to 100. But later on, if die 2 has 50, we're setting the score to 50. That's erasing our previous 100. So rather than setting the score equal to 100 here for die 2, we want to say the score equals the score plus 100. So I want to add that score plus. I want to add the value, the new score, onto the old score each time. So I want to change that. So each time I'm adding the new score onto the old score. Now, there's another way you can do this. If you remember, we at one point talked about the plus equals. Plus equals will do this also. So the last couple here, I'll just take the shortcut so you can see that too. So you can say score plus equals 100, and that'll add 100 onto the score. That's what plus equals does. Okay, so now I'm going to compile this and run this again. And display the dice, roll the dice, display the dice. I'm going to clear this again and display the dice. So now I have a 1 and a 1, that's 200. Try that again. Let's try a different one. See if I can get a couple points here. Not getting very lucky today. So here I get it, and I have a 1 for 100 points and a 5 for 50 points. I'm getting 150. So I think I've got this working now. But in our Farkle class, look at all these if-then statements we have. We have a whole page of if-then statements. We're checking die 1's value for 1 and a 5. We're checking die's 2 value for 1 and a 5. Checking die 3 value for a 1 and a 5, and die 4 value. So this is just not very, it works, but it's not very efficient. So what I want to do is make this better. And so what we're going to do is take this code and move it out of here and move it back into the die class. So I'm just going to highlight all this code we just put in here and delete it all. And come back here in a bit. And then I'm going to go into the die class. And in the die class, I'm going to add a method that will score a single die, because that'll make my life easier. So I'm going to add a method here for that. So I'm going to have a method called score. It's going to be a public int. It's going to return an integer for the score. And so your job is to write this, and what we want to do is just return the score as an integer. So check if the value is 5, if the value is a 5, and then return. Now here we're inside the die class, so we can just check value directly. Another way of visualizing this is that we were in here and we had to say die1 dot value, but now we're adding a score method here, and we can just access value directly inside the die class. So we can just say things like if value equals, and we want to use equal 5, get my a little spacing in there, then I want to return 50 points. So a return will quit this method and send back the 50 points. So add another one for 100, and if it's not a 1 or a 5, we're going to add the last one, which will be a just a return statement. So why don't you pause this and finish this method up. Okay, so here's what I have. I added an if value equals 1, then return 100. Otherwise, and then I'm not using an else here. I don't necessarily need an else because of the return statements will jump out, will quit this method and go back to the calling method right away. So if value equals 1, I'm going to return 100. And if I'm still going at this point, it means it's not a 5 and it's not a 1. So then I can just return 0 at this point. Because it's not either of these other things. So even without putting an else there, I'm still getting this because I have these return methods. So see if you can walk yourself through this and understand what this is doing. So this score method should figure out the score of one die. So now we can go back to the Farkle method and use that. So we can just say things like score equals die1 dot score. Now this will go out and get die1 score, and I think this should compile. Call the score method out there. But this is just going to get the die1 score. We also want to get die2 score, so we should add the other score. So we say something like score equals score plus die2 dot score. I'm going to do the same thing for die 3. I'm going to actually put this all in one line and make this a little cleaner, hopefully. We're just going to say score equals die1 dot score plus die2 dot score, and add some more here, do all of our die. So die 3, we're just going to add all the scores for all the dice to the score variable here. So what's nice about this is now we only have one if-then, or two if-then statements in die doing the score, but we're calling those methods over and over. We're going die1.score, and that'll do those two if-then statements for the die1, and then die2 score method and die3 score method. So we're just repeatedly calling that score method to calculate our score here, and then print it out. So this should compile, and let's see if we can get this to work. So roll our dice, display our dice. 5 and 5, 50 and 50 is 100. That looks good. Roll our dice, display our dice. 100 here and 50 here should be 150. Okay, so the next thing I want you to do, so we've done this. After rolling 6 die, calculate the score. We've done that. And then if you did not put scoring in the die class, move it there with a public int score method to the die class and calling it from the Farkle class. So we actually did that too. So we've done this first half. So now we're going to also clean up the die class a little. We're going to look at the set value method. So I'm going to go back to the die class. I have a test class. Remember we talked about unit tests here. If a test class behind here, I can run these tests. I've added some more tests here, and I'm going to get some tests that are going to fail here. Set to negative and set to 0. What I'm trying to test out is in the die method, we have a set value method, and we pass in a value to this. I'm going to change this wording just a little bit. Okay, I've changed this parameter so that the parameter we call set value, and we're given a parameter new val that's passed in. We have a value in the die, this value. Again, if you remember our picture, every die has a value here. And so we're going to set that value. Um, so in here we call our method set value. We're going to set the value of the die, which is this class level variable up here, this value. We're going to set that to the new value that's being passed into this method. But if this is a six-sided die, the value should be somewhere between 1 and 6. We shouldn't be able to set the value to a negative number. We shouldn't be able to set it to 0. So I've created some test plans to try to set it to a negative number or a 0 and do that here. We also try to, it shouldn't be more than 6, or at least more than the number of sides. I could also create like a 20-sided die or a 100-sided die, and in that case this new value shouldn't be more than the number of sides. So your job is to try to set up some if-then statements in here that will only set the value to this new value if this new value is a legal value. See if you can figure out a way of doing that. So here's my first attempt at this. So we're given a new value, and I'm going to check if the new value is less than 0. And so if it's a negative number, and if so, I don't want to use this new value anymore. So I'm going to reset, I'm going to set new value equal to value, the current dice value, so it stays at that. So I'm going to overwrite this new value, this negative number here. And I'm also going to check if new value is greater than 6, if it's a six-sided die. And new value is greater than 6, then that's wrong. You can't set a six-sided die's value to 9 or 100 or something like that. So again, I'm going to overwrite the new value with the old value of the die. Just use that. And at the end, I'm going to set the value of the die to the new value. So hopefully, in most cases, these things will never be true. So we'll skip over these and we'll just set the value equal to the new value. But if there's an error, we'll overwrite this. Now this isn't the best way of doing this, but for now, for what you know, this is just one way of doing this. So let's just compile this and then see if we can run our test plans for this. So I'm going to run my tests, and I've got more checks. I've got set negative, passed, that's good, and set too large, passed. But I'm still got some problems here. Test set 0 failed. So when we tried to set the value to 0, that failed. It shouldn't allow. And also test set large with the 20-sided die, seeing if we can set it to a large value with a 20-sided die, that failed also. Okay, so I'm going to leave this up to you now. I've got this start here. See if you can fix it. So if you fix it, all these tests should pass. So you have to watch. Right now, if we set the value to 0, that doesn't pass. And if we have a 20-sided die and set the value to a large number with a 20-sided die, that also doesn't pass. Okay, so see if you can fix this. Now I'm just going to show you two other versions of these routines just real quick. Now that we're getting into if-then statements and our program's getting more complicated, there's multiple ways of finding solutions to this. So I've commented out the old solution temporarily just to show you a new way, a different way of doing set value. And this is what we're not doing this now because this uses the AND construct, and we're not going to learn that till next week. But if we were doing this for real, this is probably how I'd write this method. I would say if the new value is greater than 0 and this is this and thing we don't know how to do yet, and the new value is less than or equal to the number of sides, then I would just say value equals the new value and do it with this way. So this is a fast way of doing a set value. And again, we'll learn how to use this and multiple if-then conditions next week. Similarly, when we did our score method down here, I had multiple returns, and a lot of people will say multiple returns are bad. We only should have one return per method because it's confusing if you have multiple ones. So maybe you're confused by that. So here's another method for a score, and maybe this is what you came up with, something similar. I just declared a variable int new score, set it to 0. And then I said if the value of the die is 5, set new score to 50. And then I also checked if the value of the die is 1, and if so, I set the new score to 100. And then I'm just returning the new score. So this just does a single return of the new score. So again, either of these ways will work, but they're just different ways of doing things. One thing's nice is you can do some commenting and uncommenting, so I can comment those out and I can uncomment these. So now that's now active. So again, with yours though, I want you to stick, I don't want you to use this more complicated thing because we don't know how to do that yet. So I want you to stick with this other method here. So you stick with this method, but fix the error so that all the tests run well. Okay, one more thing. Our last thing to do here is back in the Farkle class, we have a play game method. Let's just look at that and see what that does. So I'm just going to compile everything, create a Farkle game, and do the play game method here. So it says start in a Farkle game, it rolls the dice, it displays the dice in the score, and then asks which dice would you like to re-roll. So these are dice die 1, die 2, die 3, die 4, die 5, die 6. So maybe I want to re-roll die 2 because I'm not getting any points to that. I'd enter a 2 here, and then it asks me which other die I'd like to re-roll. And maybe I'd want to re-roll, let's re-roll the 6th die over here and re-roll that one. But right now it asked me that, but it doesn't actually re-roll the dice. This second die is the same here, and this one is the same. So it doesn't re-roll the die. So we've got to fix this. So I'm going to go into Farkle class. Here's the play game method. We start the Farkle game, we roll all the dice and display all the dice. And then we ask the user which die would you like to re-roll and read that in. And then we have this method roll one die and we pass it in the die number. So that's what's not working. And then we ask the user what other die they want to re-roll and call roll one die again. But this roll one die method isn't working. So let's find that. Roll one die. We give it a die number. We say system.out.println rolling die number. And it'll say, so like here it says rolling die number 6 or rolling die number 2. So it prints out the die number. Now you're supposed to enter code here that'll help us out. So if die number is 1, we want to re-roll die 1. So we can just write things like if die, and this is just die number is just a variable, an integer variable here. So it's not an object or anything. So I don't need any dot methods or anything like that. I can just say if die number equals 1, and if that's the case, I'm going to roll the first die. So now I have to be a little more careful. Die 1 is my object here, and I'm going to call the roll method. So if I go look in my die class, there's a method called roll. And again, in our picture here, we're in Farkle. We want to roll die 1. So here's die 1, and it has a method called roll. So we can say die 1 dot to get us up here, and then call the roll method for that die. So die 1 dot roll will roll that die. Get my semicolon there and compile. So this will, if they pick the first die, this will re-roll the first die. But this won't handle the second or third die. It'll only re-roll the first die. So I could try this out, and as long as I keep picking the first die, this will work. But as soon as I pick another die, this won't work. So I can play the game. And it says which die. Which die would you like to re-roll? So I've got a 5, 2, 2. So let's re-roll this this first die because that'll actually work. I'm going to say 1, And I'm going to also re-roll die 2, but that one's not going to work. So it re-rolled the first die. It was a 5, now it's a 4, but the second one didn't work. So your job now is to keep going with more if-then statements. And we have to check if the die number is 2, and if so, re-roll die number 2. And set up a set of if-then statements to check die number against all the different six die and roll the right die in the right condition. If that's true, you should be able to play this Farkle game simply and re-roll some dice and stuff like that. So that should wrap up this method here. Now, if you're interested in a bonus challenge, if this all seems kind of easy to you and you want to try something more, well, see if you can modify the play method. Again, this is just a bonus thing. See if you can modify this play game method and ask the user, when they're done here, we display the dice. Ask them then, do you want to roll some more the dice again? And then if so, repeat this code again and ask them which dice you want to re-roll, and then display the dice again. So basically you want to have some sort of if-then statement and repeat that. Now one thing to note is that we don't know how to work with strings within an if-then. So make sure you might want to ask them do you want to roll dice again, 1 for yes or 2 for no, or use an integer variable, because we're kind of stuck in integer land right now until next week. Okay, but again, that's just a bonus exercise. You don't have to do that. Now zip up your project folder and submit it for this once you've got it all working.